Hi there, Jonny here from JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk, and welcome to this very special video series. Studio One 4.5 is here. It's awesome. You guys are going to be totally blown away if you haven't been already by the live stream broadcast from the guys over in Baton Rouge. If your brain is still intact, that's impressive. But this is an absolutely mind-melting update for Studio One, and it comes with 68 brand new features. And in this video series, we're going to go through as many of them as I possibly can. And the idea is that this video is going to be an overview. So we'll kind of like go through the highlights of Studio One 4.5, and then successive videos after this will go into a little bit more detail, and they'll be kind of short and sweet. The idea being that you'll get to see a feature, and then you'll get to go and check it out in Studio One 4.5 for yourself. So in this video, I'm just going to overview the whole thing. And so here we go. Let's get going. So 68 brand new features, and a lot of it is to do with redesign. A lot of it is to do with answering probably the top voted feature requests over at answers.presonus.com, including the one that has had the most votes ever. And it's been on the feature request list for a very long time. And that one is also in here as well. And that one I can't really demonstrate quite so much because it's more something I need to explain than to demonstrate. But you will be able to go and try it out for yourself. That is more to do with the CPU load of things like Presence XT, Impact, MIDI, and Mojito, and all of those that tend to be a little bit heavy on the CPU. Well, there's been a big improvement under the hood with CPU loads and spreading it out, the load across the cores and all of that. So that is all very cool. But as I say, I can't really demonstrate that too terribly much. Suffice to say, go and open a song in 4.5 and just load up a few Presence XTs or a few MIDIs and all of that, and see kind of how much quicker they load and how much lighter they are on the CPU, because they definitely are. Okay, so let's get into some of these features. So the first one we're going to hit really is when you first open 4.5, as you've been looking at it just now during my intro, you can see that there's not a whole lot that's changed. In fact, pretty much nothing has changed. Unless you are very, very observant, in which case you might have spotted this button down here, which says Show Groups, Channel List. I'll explain that in just a minute. So the first one we're going to get onto is the input channels and the redesign that's taken place there, and the new gain and polarity controls, which I'm also going to come onto as well. So let's open up the input section. And as soon as I do, hello, you can see me. This is me talking to you. And the first thing you'll notice is that we now have software input gain, and we have these very nice polarity controls as well, which is going to be very useful, very handy. I'm actually using this one just now. I've added 3.4 dB of gain to increase a little bit of the volume of my microphone going in to my screen capture software. To make it a little bit louder for the video. But the cool thing is this just kind of helps out with gain staging on the way in. So you can control your input gain on the way in much better than you could before. So that's all very cool on the input section. So you're probably thinking, why don't these appear over here? Why do we not have those over here? Well, the cool thing is you do. If I close that section for a moment, and I'll show you the next feature. If I click the options wrench, and you can see now that this has been reorganized so that everything is under its own little heading. So you've got groupings, you've got visibility, you've got channel components. And one of the new channel components is this one here, input controls. So if I click that one, And now those same input controls that are available on the input section are now available at the top of your channels in the mixer as well, which is very, very handy for gain staging. So basically, all those times that you used to have a mix tool as your first insert, that's a thing of the past now. You don't need to do that. You've got these gain controls here. So if something is coming in a little hot, you can turn it down here. If you've brought a mix in from Studio One's into Studio One, I should say, from outside, and you want to turn the gain down a bit, you can do. You can do that here, or you can turn it up if you need to. Whatever you need to do, you can control the gain and the polarity right here. Don't need to do that with the mix tool anymore, which is very cool. So the other thing that you might have noticed in this is group assignment. So if I give that a click at the bottom, and now notice what has changed at the bottom of your mixer channel. Above where your automation is, you now have another indicator here, and at the moment it says none, but this is all to do with the new grouping that is available in Studio One, and there's even its own little list here. So if you have lots of channels and you have lots of channels grouped together, like you have a drum group, a backing vocal group, a guitars group, a keyboards group, whatever you have, you can assign those all at the bottom here, and they will appear here, and you can suspend them, you can turn them off, you can ungroup, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. And if you hold down the Alt key, let's say you have your keyboards all grouped together, you have like a piano, a Fender Rhodes, and Hammond organ, and let's say a clavinet or something like that, and that's your keyboard group. And let's say you want to turn up the clavinet within that group a little bit, but because those channels are grouped, all of the faders are going to move. But if you hold the Alt key or Alt key and move that fader, only that fader will move. That's not a new feature for 4.5, but it actually works better now that we have this new grouping implemented. So if I could, with these channels here, I could decide, hey, these are going to be my band. These 5 channels here are going to be my band. So I'm going to have a band group, so I can group these together by selecting them all and pressing G, I think. Okay, that hasn't worked. Yes, of course, it's Control G. So if I now do Control G, this little dialog box comes up, and if I change that to band, and okay that, and there's our first group. And as you can see, the word band comes up at the bottom there, and you should, I think, be able to change the color. Can you change the color? This is something I've not tried yet. I don't know. But when you click that, all of these things become available. So editing, volume, mute and solo, record, monitor, insert, sends, those are all parameters that are now available in your group, and you can have panning as well. So all of those now have the little group icon and the word band at the bottom. So that's all very cool. That's all very new and different. So moving swiftly on. So I'm going to play this track, and I'm going to show you the new metering options that are available in Studio One, because now we have some fantastic new ones. So let's just play a little bit of this track, and I'll show you what you can do here. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that there are RMS lines that are now appearing in the metering, which is very cool. So now we have RMS metering. So if you right-click in the level meter, these are the options that come up. So normally it defaults to peak. This is what you're normally used to seeing. But now you can right-click and you can have peak RMS. You can also adjust the peak hold. You can adjust the hold length. And you can also choose pre-fader metering. So if you're in the recording phase, you can have pre-fader metering, which is great for making sure that your input gain is correct when you're recording. And then you can switch that off when you're in mixing mode. That is a very high requested feature That had a lot of votes, that one. So let's move on to the next one. So the next one is sidechaining. Sidechaining has always been a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit clunky in Studio One, but now it's a lot easier to do. So let's go over to the effects, and I will show you exactly what I mean. Now, the old way of doing it, let's say we want to duck the drums whenever the bass is playing. So here's the old way you would have to do it. You grab the compressor and you put it on the drums, which is this one here. Of course, all my channels are grouped. That's why that's happened. Let's Control Z that, and let's remove the group. So, dissolve. There we go. Perfect. So now everything's back to normal. So let's grab the compressor again, and we'll put that back on there. Now the compressor is just on the drum channel. And the old way of doing it was that you'd have to then go and, in the sends here, you'd have to go to sidechains and then select the sidechain there, which is a little bit of a clunk. It's 2 or 3 steps. Well, now you don't have to do that anymore, because in the compressor there is a new button here, a new sidechain button, and next to it says sources. And when you click that, all the available channels that you have in your mix come up, and you can select bass. And it's that simple. And now you have all of that set up. So I can now dial in some compression like this. And now the compressor has been triggered by the bass guitar. And it's as easy as literally compressor in and choose your source. Job done. And the guys in Hamburg are lovingly referring to that as reverse sidechaining. It's not really reverse sidechaining, but it just means that you can set the sidechain up on the compressor or the EQ or whatever it is that has, whichever plugin it is that you're using that has sidechain capability. It's that easy now. And that, for me, that's brilliant for me, because I use sidechaining, not very often, but when I do, it's I use it extensively. Like on EDM tracks, I'll use a lot of sidechaining. But in jazz stuff, I don't use it very much. I'll maybe use it very, very lightly on the kick drum and the bass guitar, kind of, or the upright bass, like I've done here. But it'll be very, very light and subtle usually. All right, so that's reverse sidechaining, and that is a very, very cool feature. Okay, so the next one I want to check out. I'm kind of going through these in no particular order. These are just kind of the audio that they are coming to my mind from memory. Is we've now got this option for when you do an export mix down to do a mono mix down, which is going to be really, really handy if you're sending out mono tracks. Like if you're a vocalist or you're a voiceover artist and you're wanting to send a voiceover track to a client that you're working for or you're working with. So when you do export mix down, you go song, export mix down, and now next to the output there is a mono button here. And so you just click that right there, and there's a whole bunch of other options here. So now you can change from a constant bit rate to a variable bit rate, and you can keep it at 320 kilobits. This is what it's always been. It has always been constant bit rate, but you can now have variable bit rates, and there are some various reasons that I'm not going to go into here for why you would want a variable bit rate. So yes, so if you want to export a mono track, you can now do that by hitting the mono button. So there you go. That's another cool option. I'm going to cancel that out, and let's have a look at the next one. So the next one involves MIDI. There's a whole raft of new MIDI options. So let's go and take a look at those. So let's come out of the mixer view, and we'll go into the arranger view, and I'm going to double click this presence track here. And I've got just a few notes here. Let's solo this. Nothing really much to it, but there's a reason why I've only done 4 notes. And that is because I want to show you some of the new features that you can do. Let's say you want this pattern to go up and then down. Well, there's a cool way of doing this that's really quick now, and you could probably create a macro to do this, or you could like have I'm sure you could create your own modifier key commands to do this as well. So I'm going to select these 4 notes, and I'm going to go to the action menu, and as soon as I open up the action menu, you'll notice that everything has been reorganized into logical groups. So you've got global select notes, delete notes, and all of this, and there's a few other MIDI editing options which I'm going to come into a bit more detail on a video in this series where I'm going to go into a lot more of these MIDI editing features. So the one I want to choose for this one is mirror notes. So when I click that, this little guy opens up, and I am going to, you got mirror notes horizontally, mirror on middle, mirror on first note, mirror on a custom note. So you can choose where you want this phrase to appear, or you can choose mirror notes vertically. The one I want to do is I want to keep it on mirror notes horizontally, and I want to do mirror on middle, and I'm going to do OK. And now it's gone, see, it's flipped it exactly the other way around. Okay, so that's very cool if you decide that you want this to be a descending phrase only. But let's say we want to go back and we want to have the original phrase and then we want it to descend. So let's Control Z that. And let's duplicate that. And then let's go back to that mirror notes feature. And we'll go mirror on middle. And now it's basically an exact mirror. It's what we'd call in classical music terms a retrograde inversion. So it is backwards and upside down. Okay? So can you see this interval of a semitone here now appears here, and then you've got that interval of a third there, which is now a minor third. Alright, so have a listen to this. Now let's say we really like that and we want this to continue all the way through the song, which we might want to do. This is the second one I'm going to show you guys. So I select all of those. I go to Action, and I need to find it here. Hang on a second. Extend to part end, or repeat notes to part end. That's what I want. I think I want repeat notes to part end. And as soon as I click that, now we have that running all the way through the song. Now, this is great if you're into minimalist kind of concepts. So, like for example, you just have like one little figure and you want it to repeat all the way through a certain section like an ostinato. Oh, this is great for drum programming. This is fantastic for drum programming because you can create your little 1-bar groove and then you can just use that repeat notes to end of parts, and that's it. You've got your groove for 8 bars or however long it is. So, and you've just created your groove in maybe 2 minutes. And instead of having to hit the D key repeatedly, you've just done that. Now you could probably have a macro do that for you. But I think that's brilliant. So now see, if I had changed all the velocities, if I'd customized the velocities here, when I hit that part repeat notes to part end, the velocity automation would have gone with it as well. And it would sound a little bit more natural. But there you go. So that's 2 of the MIDI editing features that are now available in Studio One. You will also notice that we have a macro toolbar for each section, and they are customizable. So you can have this musical editing one here. You can have note lengths and all of that business. You can have whatever you want over here. And you've got note selection macros there. All very, very useful stuff that are individual to your music. So this is cool for MIDI programming, to have your own macro toolbar for that, but also when you're in the audio editing page, you also have those as well. So let's take this Fender Rhodes, let's open that up. See, you have your own editing macros, So you can customize as many macros as you want for each of these toolbars. So now you could go totally macro crazy, and I'm pretty sure that some of you will do exactly that. So that's the independent macro toolbars that are brand new to Studio One 4.5. So the next one that I'm going to look at is developments to the chord track. Chord track is something that is growing and expanding and developing all the time. So let's have a look at that. So I've got it set up here on this track. And the cool thing is you can audition these now. So if I was to select that chord there, and if I open the inspector for that chord, now we see that we have this audition chords button here. And if I was to go to this instrument above that, see it says none at the moment. But what I can do is, because I have a Presence XT in this song, there's a couple of things that I can choose. I can choose either the chord preview, and what that does is that brings in an instance of MIDI into my song as a separate instrument track called chord preview, and I can choose the sound that I want for my chord previews, or I can use Presence, which is already here. So I could use this nylon guitar sound if I wanted to, but let's open the chord preview, and automatically that creates a new track in the mixer called chord preview. And if I click on the keyboard sign here, here it is, MIDI, and it's just a defaulted sound, which I don't find necessarily appealing, but the cool thing is I can change that sound. So if I wanted to change that to a pad, I could change it to that one if I wanted to. And then the cool thing is, if I go back out of the mix window, when I select a chord, it should play. I'm not quite sure why it's not playing. Hang on just one moment. It's because I've not ticked play track. Of course, I know why. It's because I've got the solo button engaged. Take off the solo button, and now it should play. There we go. So there you go. That sounds absolutely hideous, but as I say, you can change that sound if you want. If you don't like that, you can go back to the chord preview, and you can go pad, and let's just choose that one, and let's see what that's like this time. Perfect. So there you go. So you can now audition your chords. So when you've got your chord track in, and let's say you want to change one of these chords, let's say you don't like this here, you want this to be a G7 or something. Well, you can double click. You can go G, and yes, it does do that until you untick unless you change these options. Every time you change something in your chord track, it's going to audition the chord. So just be aware of that. That you might not want it to do that every time you make one small adjustment, but you might want it to do that. So just be aware of that. So there you go. So that's the chord audition for the chord track, and the next one that we're going to very quickly look at is to do with waveforms. So let's come out of the mixer, because the mixer doesn't show us the waveforms. And I'm going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit, actually, to these channels. I'm going to zoom in on the bass. Let's use the bass as this option here. Now, you might notice something about the way these waveforms are drawn, and I can zoom in even more. Let's just move over to where there's actual note. Here we go. Now, have a look at the way that the waveform is drawn in now. Look how nice and smooth that is. Now, I have this selected as an option, but you don't have to have it selected as an option. I'm going to show you how you change it. So at the moment for you guys, it might be default that it's not switched on. So I will show you how to change that. So if you're Windows, you go to Studio One, Options, then you go to the Advanced tab, and choose Editing, And down here it says draw smooth waveforms. So if I untick that and hit apply and hit OK, they kind of look a lot less smooth than they used to be. So that's how it is default. But if you want to change it to include the new option, then you just go Advanced, Editing, Draw Smooth Waveforms, Apply. Okay, job done. And now everything just looks nice and smooth, no matter how far in or out you're zoomed. Okay. Okay, so there are just a few more to get through. And as I say, I'm going to go into these in a lot more detail in more detailed videos in this series. So the next one we're going to look at is the new ability to lock events and lock tracks, which means you don't accidentally edit something and you don't accidentally move something, which is something that's been asked for a very long time. These got a lot of votes. So I'm going to show you how to lock the events and the tracks. So let's take this drum track here. I don't know why that event is highlighted, but that's okay. So what we do is we right click and we go lock track. Now that track is locked, but let's say we want to lock all of these events that are in that track. I select them all and I can go time lock and edit lock. So now they're locked in place in time where you want them to be, and you also can lock it for editing, so you can't accidentally go in and accidentally edit something. So now with these locked, if I try and move, they won't move. So no accidental dragging of these events. They are locked, as is the track. I can't now, I can reorientate it. Okay, I was about to say you can't reorientate it, but you can reorientate it. But it is otherwise, the track itself is locked, but the events are locked. So I can double click for editing, but I can't actually edit. It won't do anything. So if I try and delete this, it won't delete it. It's completely locked. So there you go. That was a highly requested feature as well. So next on my list is what you can do with sending tracks out to clients. Let's say I want to send out this bass track to a client. It's a very cool little bass line. All right, let's say I want to send that out to a client. Well, I go to my Files tab. There's my client folder. And what I can do is I can hold Alt down and I can drag it. And then whilst over there, if I hold down Control, I can cycle between the options just by pressing Control. I can have WAV file rendered insert effects, just a regular WAV file, or I can have the audio loop version. So let's just say for this one, I want to do just the WAV file, and then I just release, and there it goes. So now that that's sent off to my client, and my client can go into that Dropbox and they can import it into their song. So that's a really, really cool little feature, being able to choose the different export types that you want. Okay, next we're going to go to the I/O setup, because there's some significant changes here, and some of these have been highly sought after as well. So let's go to Studio One, Options, and we're going to go to Song Setup, and here we are in the Audio I/O setup. As you can see, it's had a bit of a makeover, so it looks considerably nicer than it has been. You can still make all your adjustments to it, but you can change the colors of your channels, your input or output channels, if you so want. I've changed the main output to white, but my input channel, let's say I want to make this one, this is where I'm speaking to you on, let's say I want to make this yellow. Well, I can now do that. And when I go to the input tab, which I'll show you in a minute, that also shows up as yellow. which is very cool. But one of the very, very cool thing is that now you can import and export your I/O. So if you're switching over to, let's say you're taking your interface out to use with a different computer. Let's say you use your interface in your main studio, but you also use it remotely on a laptop as well. Well, you can export the I/O to your laptop computer for that interface. Or let's say you're using somebody else's interface, you can import the I/O for that interface into Studio One. That is very, very cool. You know, I have a remote recording rig and I use a little AudioBox USB 96, which is only 2-channel. And so, you know, when I'm using that remotely, I have the I/O set up for that. And this works beautifully for that. Okay, so I'm going to hit apply and okay, that will close. And now if I go back to the mixer, and if I go back to my input tabs, there you see my input left is now yellow, which is very cool. So that's that one, and we're actually now at the very last one that I'm going to talk about, and that is video export. I'm going to do a much more detailed video on this. Suffice to say that I'm going to show you that it's much improved. If I open this song here, I've got a video here that I did on melodic toms, creating melodic toms in Studio One 4, which I did a while back. But I've now created a little music bed for that. And let's say I want to export the whole thing with the new music bed. So let's just play a little bit of this. Okay, I'm going to show you a way in which you can create melodic toms for dance styles, that kind of stuff, in Studio One. And it's actually a lot more simple than you think. So let's say we're happy with that, we like the music bed, it sounds great, we want to export this out now. So we go to Song, Export Mixdown, and I have to try and find it. I think I've gone to the wrong export. Yep, I wanted to go to Song, Export Video. That's the one I wanted to go to, not Export Mixdown. Export Video. And now a new dialog box comes up, and this gives you a whole bunch of file type options. So I'm on Windows, so I can use M4V or MPEG-4. If you're on a Mac, there are a few other different file types that will come up for you. And you can choose to use the source codecs or not. And because it's a video, you don't have to worry about the start and end markers and all of that. It just takes it from the length of the video. It's all very, very cool. And then you just hit OK. I'm not going to do that just now because it will max out my CPU because I'm running screen capture software as well. So, but when you hit OK and you're happy with where it's going to go and the destination of it, it will now export that video with the new music bed that I have created in Studio One, and I don't have to go and use something like Camtasia to put those two things together anymore. I can now do this all in Studio One. It's very, very cool. Which is great if you are somebody that writes music for jingles and somebody sends you the video file and they want you to put a music bed under their TV commercial or whatever it might be, and so you put the music under it, and then you can now export the whole thing out as one. You don't have to marry it up in another video editing software. So there you go. So I'm going to hit cancel this time. But when I actually do the more in-depth video on that, I will actually export it and I'll show you what it comes out like. All right, so there we go. That is it for this very first video of this series, the overview. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you have been blown away by a few of these features as I have demonstrated them. And I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.